Speaking of Uldir, after destroying the final seal, Mithrax just went ahead and buggered off, back to Nazmir. Nice of him to give everyone a bit of respite, I guess. But officially, the Cathraxi General returned to Uldir to herald its new master's coming. G'huun had now turned its former cage into a fortress, and freed a whole bunch of other imprisoned Titan experiments within the facility as well. The threat now posed by G'huun soon reached far beyond Dazar'alor, with the Alliance deciding that they too wanted to be involved. Lucky for them, they had already established some footholds within the Horde levelling zones anyway at some point. Bran Bronzebeard had travelled to Nazmir with Alliance champions, attempting to recruit the Blood Trolls. Obviously that mission failed, but Fort Victory, the Alliance outpost, had been established in the process. So, as is tradition, both factions get credit for this raid. Immediately upon entering Uldir, champions faced Talok, the Titan construct being fed blood magic in the last video. And after punching that thing in the boobs, we met a Titan Watcher, Mother, which stands for Matron of Tenacity, Herald of Endless Research. Deeming all of us contaminated, she engaged us in battle, but after having her systems restored, Mother changed her mind and decided to help us instead. Help that was very much appreciated as we fought against several other nasty pasties, which the book glosses over pretty quickly. The corrupted remains of Loa, who had been discarded after lethal experimentation, aka Fetid Devourer, the Herald of N'Alotha, aka Zek Voz, and a corrupted plague made flesh, aka Vectis. And after all of that, the heroes were ever so slightly shocked to face an undead Zul, who had been resurrected into a dark prophet by G'huun and Mithrax. Heading further into the depths of Uldir to the heart of corruption, champions then faced Mithrax, the Unraveller, bringer of oblivion. The powers of the Void were on full display, with Mithrax commanding Naraki to join in battle, as well as awakening its living weapon, Zalzaix. But in the end, we took its ass. Huzzah! Finally, the champions entered the Blood God's lair, only to find G'huun just kinda mooching about inside a wall. Endless waves of its minions then attacked, but the heroes used the Titan's re-origination drive to call the old god forth. A long and tiring battle then ensued, but eventually, the Blood God fell, and all was right in the world. Except, Bran Bronzebeard did feel a tinge of regret. He knew that for the sake of Azeroth, G'huun needed to be killed. However, in doing so, Alliance champions had only strengthened the forces of the Horde. With the Blood God out the way, King Rastakhan could now focus on the war itself. But the Alliance did gain something from this raid. Mother. Bran and the Alliance heroes convinced her to travel to the Chamber of the Heart and assist with the healing of Azeroth. She started that by running diagnostics on all the Titan facilities around the world, gauging their condition to see if they could be used to save the dying world soul, and informed us that that would take precisely 11 weeks. At which point, Magni told us to just go off and do whatever it is that we do in our spare time. So everyone went to Gold Sharin and banged furiously or something, I don't know. Next, battle for dazar'alor. As expected, King Rastakhan and Princess Talanji immediately pledged the Golden Fleet to the Horde, something which deeply concerned the Alliance, because how dare the Horde gain a navy after the Alliance gained a navy? But before we get to the second raid of the expansion, let's gloss over the Alliance's war campaign stuff. First, champions head to Vol'dun, where we assassinated a bunch of members of the Reliquary, the Horde's archaeological effort, including High Examiner Arlathol's Sunwatcher. That mission was successful, but one of the little gnomes accompanying us, Guzbert Gizmoflank, got straight up bloody murdered by a yet-to-be-identified Sand Lane elf. Next, we head to Nazmir to assassinate another high-profile target, Ranger Captain Ariel, one of Sylvanas' most trusted Dark Rangers. Doing that, we discovered plans for a super-secret meeting taking place nearby, a meeting between Princess Talanji, Rokan, and the jerk of a Sand Lane elf that had killed Guzbert, Blood Prince Dreven. We then attempted to ambush and assassinate Dreven, but that didn't work. He murdered more of our friends, and then buggered off. At which point, Chandris decided he was now our top priority. High Commander Halford Wormbane disagreed. Trade Prince Gallywix was our next target, apparently. We attempted to assassinate that guy, but failed. Jerk tricked us with a decoy, and cheesed it. However, we then finally tracked down and executed Dreven, avenging Guzbert, and all was right in the world. Also, we assisted Jaina in defending the Sea Gate at Angleport, not looking at explosions like a really cool guy. And also we made a Gorilla Massive, which is probably nothing to worry about. With all of that achieved, Spymaster Shaw then came up with a real plan that didn't feel like a bunch of filler. We would take the Zandalari capital in one fell swoop. So, 2 missions into the heart of Zuldazar itself then took place. First, taking advantage of the Chaos Zone by all of our recent assassinations, we targeted the Golden Fleet itself and the harbour defences, planting remote detonation explosives. For now, we would wait before setting off those bombs though. The time needed to be just right. Next, Shaw, Flynn Fairwind and an Alliance champion infiltrated the Zandalari treasury. The objective? Retrieve the Abyssal Scepter and replace it with a decoy. So we did that, although we did have to cheese it when the treasure itself sprang to life. But with that success, all the pieces for a strike on Zandalar were now in place. Enough ships would remain behind, in Kultiras, to mount a proper defence, but the bulk of the fleet would now sail to Nazmir. Upon arrival, Jaina, Shaw and the champion led their forces into Zalamar, taking the area from the remaining Blood Trolls. And with that area secure, we used the Abyssal Scepter to create a dense fog. Under the cover of said fog, a decoy Alliance force was then spread throughout Nazmir, making their way towards the Bloodgate loudly, whilst Jaina, Shaw and the champions returned to the Koltiran fleet. Meanwhile, Nathanos Blightcaller caught word of this loud Alliance incursion, so he dispatched Horde champions to immediately request aid from King Rastakhan, and the king agreed to lend the Horde his forces, with Talanji baiting the champions to spread the Crown's order far and wide. Mobilise the Golden Fleet. The combined Horde Zandalari forces did manage to repel the attack at the Bloodgate, pushing the Alliance back into the swamps, but upon discovering the source of the dense fog, Talanji then finally realised this had all been a big fudging ruse. In their absence, the Koltiran ships had sailed straight into the capital. Shaw's plan had worked perfectly. As Jaina sailed her fleet into the harbours of dazar'alor, the previously planted bombs detonated, absolutely decimating the Zandalari's fleet, allowing the Alliance to successfully fight their way up the steps to the royal palace itself. With enemies closing in again, Rastakhan called out 2-1 Samdi for aid, and the Loa obliged, creating a blood moon and raising the dead to join the fight, whilst floating sideways in the air for some reason. But even with that new obstacle, and oh my god, an undead massive gorilla, the Alliance still reached the palace and confronted the king, demanding his surrender. Rastakhan refused, boasting that his people had been around for a lot longer than the Alliance had, and would probably be around for a long time afterwards as well. At which point, Alliance champions went ahead and took his ass. Reluctantly. They had no choice, according to Chronicle, which is debatable, because this entire section of the book has been about how they instigated this attack in the first place. Once King Rastakhan was dead, the Alliance decided now was a good time to leave the city. However, Nathanos Blightcaller did happen to witness Jaina leaving the palace, so everything was her fault now. Back inside, Talanji found her father and took his hand, trying to offer comfort. But in doing so, Bwonsamdi's pact shifted from Rastakhan to the princess, with the king apologising to his daughter in his final breath. Bwonsamdi then appeared, being very coy about some kind of bargain Rastakhan had made, which made Talanji both angry and confused. But she then ordered the Horde forces to bring back her father's killer. Now. So, Nathanos and the Horde champions raced to the docks, facing High Tinker Mekatork, a couple of Tide Sages, an Elemental, and then Jaina herself. However, ultimately, Jaina escaped. The day was lost for the Horde, and not without casualties on the Alliance side of things either. High Tinker Mekatork was critically wounded in his fight, only managing to escape death with the help of an escape pod, which placed him in suspended animation. Nobody had any idea how to awaken him from that, or even open the pod, for the time being. Shaw reported their success back to Anduin, predicting victory in the war within weeks. But Anduin was not so certain or enthusiastic. Rastakhan was supposed to be captured, not killed. His death would only strengthen the bond between Horde and Zandalari. Meanwhile, back in Zuldazar, a funeral was held for the fallen king, during which Bane Bloodhoof attempted to reason with the war chief, saying the Horde should open negotiations with the Alliance, maybe. However, Sylvanas then informed Bane that the Horde do not abandon their allies, nor do they negotiate with a faction that had literally just slain one of their leaders. What Sylvanas didn't say was that she knew peace did not serve the Jailer's goals. Peace would not help him break his bonds and remake the Engine of Death. Sylvanas had to ensure the bloodshed of the Fourth War continued, and she had yet another cruel plan in mind to achieve that. She then told us to meet her aboard the Banshee's whale, so we did. There, Sylvanas informed us that we have a Trojan derrick, Obviously being the firstborn son of the Proudmoore family, they would wish to recover him, and the Banshee Queen intended to let them have him, but also manipulate his mind so that he would butcher them all in their sleep. Bane was not a fan of that plan. See, like Varrock Sarfang, Bane believes in loyalty and honour, not whatever the hell this was. Sylvanas had always championed free will for the Forsaken, and yet here she was, reanimating a corpse against his will, intending to break his mind through torture into doing heinous acts, also against his will. Everything about this plan was dishonourable, and Bane intended to stop it, whatever the cost. Now, Tides of Vengeance, which is apparently 34 years after the Dark Portal. Tyrande Whisperwind had grown very impatient, waiting for help from the Alliance. Her people were still locked in battle with the Horde at the foot of the Burned World Tree, whilst the Alliance were off gallivanting. So, she sent 3 representatives, including her adopted daughter Shandris Feathermoon, to petition King Anduin Wrynn. The young king was deeply sympathetic. The Alliance had declared war because of Teldrassil burning, but as a result, they were now fighting on several fronts. Although they were close to victory, they just couldn't spare any extra forces at the moment. Anduin vowed to assist the Night Elves in reclaiming Teldrassil before the end of the war, but not right now. And that answer filled Tyrande with rage. Time and again, the Kaldorei had aided the Alliance, and now, when her people desperately needed their help, too bloody busy. Fine. Tyrande had heard tales of an ancient aspect of Elune that could be invoked in times of great need. The Night Warrior, the darkest face of the goddess. However, the ritual in order to draw down this incarnation of Elune's wrath was highly dangerous and was said to take a great toll on the host. But Tyrande didn't give a crap about any of that. She saw only justice for her people, and vengeance on Sylvanas Windrunner. However, as Tyrande went around gathering the things required for this rite, she was followed by Maiev Shadowsong, Shandris Feathermoon, and an Alliance champion, who tracked her all the way to Bashalaran, where the dark ritual was set to take place. Tyrande then cried out to Elune, asking why she had allowed so many Night Elves to die a terrible death, demanding that the goddess grant her the power of the Night Warrior, else forever lose her High Priestess. And Elune obviously heard all of that, because she then bestowed her child with the power of her rage. Amid her transformation, a contingent of Horde attacked, but Tyrande rose and struck down every single one of them, with ease. The priestess then ordered Maiev and Shandris to prepare the Night Elves for their own war, one to reclaim their ancestral lands of Darkshore. Their first target, Nathanos Blightcaller. See, Nathanos had been ever so slightly concerned about the black moon hanging about in the sky above Darkshore, so he was nearby, trying to determine its cause. Tyrande attacked the ranger, slaughtering his forces with ease as she went, but Nathanos then used Sylvanas' Valkyr to raise 2 slain Kaldorei into undeath, Siramoon Warden and Dalaran Summermoon. Tyrande was horrified and cried out to her sisters to resist, but that didn't work. Both Sira and Dalaran rose as Dark Wardens. Wasn't a complete loss for Tyrande though. She persisted in the fight and managed to kill one of Sylvanas' Valkyr in the process, whilst Nathanos and the other Valkyr eventually had to cheese it. Over time, the Horde's foothold in Darkshore began to weaken. Supply lines and scouting parties frequently attacked by Tyrande, Malfurion, and their vengeful forces. But Darkshore mostly remained in the Horde's grasp right up until the Night Elves launched a full coastal assault from the Moonspray, winning Darkshore back from the Horde. But even after this victory, tensions remained between Tyrande and King Anduin. The Derek section. Bane Bloodhoof was not the only person horrified by Sylvanas' raising and torture of Derek. Thomas Zelling, the newly forsaken Tidesage, was also appalled. So, the two of them and a Horde champion went ahead and did a daring rescue, absconding with Derek and secretly bringing him to Jaina. The Lord Admiral was initially horrified, and then convinced that this was nothing more than a cruel trick. But Derek then spoke, informing his sister that Bane had in fact saved him from the Banshee Queen's nasty plans. At which point, Jaina was grateful, if not ever so slightly confused. Why the bloody hell was Bane helping her? The Tauren High Chieftain then revealed that he had long sensed that there was something wrong with the Horde. He didn't even really understand why they and the Alliance were at war with each other. Their greatest threat was in Silithus, the Giant Sword, and the dying planet. Bane knew that his actions were treason, but he needed to be true to who he was, true to what the Tauren stood for. And then he buggered off. And although he had been careful, Sylvanas was very aware of what he had done, thanks to her loyalists, aka snitches. The Blade of the Black Empire. Throughout this Fourth War, Queen Azshara's presence had been felt and noticed. But now that both the Alliance and Horde were weakened by the battle for dazar'alor, Azshara struck in earnest. She sent her forces from the city of Nazjatar to the surface, gathering prisoners and sacrifices for the old god N'Alotha, assaulting settlements along the coastline of both Kul Tiras and Zandalar, and then cheesing it before anyone had a chance to counterattack. Both factions then got to work, shoring up the defences along said coastlines, during which Horde heroes recovered an artefact from a Tortolan seeker, Collector Kojo, a blade left behind by the fleeing Naga. 'Twas Ny'Alotha, the Blade of the Black Empire, a legendary dagger with a history of betrayal and madness. A dagger which contained immense void energy and whispered to anyone who held it. Most recently, it had been wielded by every single Shadow Priest during Legion, but had vanished for a time, reappearing in the clutches of the Naga. But now it was mine! Ny'Alotha informed the Horde champion that Queen Azshara's people were in the process of creating a storm so powerful it could scour the continents of all life. But lucky for us, she knew how to prevent it. First, the blade led us to Drustvar, where we recovered another artifact, the Void Stone. A little bit shocked when Ny'Alotha then possessed the body of the High Elf we'd taken it from. With this new body, she then helped us locate 2 more artifacts, the Trident of the Deep Ocean and the Tempest Caller. And after that, she told us to meet her in the Crucible of Storms, where we would use the artifacts to stop the Naga. However, upon entering that place, the Horde champion was betrayed. Instead of using the power we'd gathered to thwart Azshara, Ny'Alotha instead used it to bargain with N'Alotha, offering the old god the artifacts and us in exchange for her freedom. An offer which the old god eagerly accepted before turning its giant eye on the champion. N'Alotha then placed a terrible curse on us, digging its tendrils deep into our mind, transforming the world around us into hundreds of eyes, watching our every move. So, the champion desperately sought out a cure for that weird curse, and did manage to lift it, but there was one little thing still nagging at the back of our mind. We'd left the dagger behind at the Crucible of Storms and forgotten about it. So, we went back there, took a whole bunch of Void Nasty's asses, including Unat, Harbinger of the Void, and then returned to War Chief Sylvanas with the dagger, and she very happily accepted this gift. Next, the legend of Mechagon. Not far from the Crucible of Storms, on an island off Borealis, an ancient vault had opened. A vault which once belonged to the Titan Keeper Mimiron, where he kept his collection of technology and stuff. At some point in history, the King of Gnomeregan had led an expedition to find this mythical vault, only to be never heard from again. But legend had it that they'd found it, taking the technology from within and building the highly technological city of Mechagon. Over the following years, as these gnomes aged, they replaced their failing organs with mechanical wonders from the vault, effectively reversing the old god's curse of flesh and becoming mechanomes. More time passed, with another gnome, Curvo Cogpipe, crash landing on Mechagon Isle. The Mechanome King welcomed him, giving him a tour of the city, and even showing him how the mechanization process worked. It was a painful procedure, yes, but that pain was only temporary. Aging and death, however, not so much. But Curvo was later approached by the king's son, Prince Erasmin, who urged him to get the hell out of here. The king had obtained a super weapon, the Mech Originator, a device which could forcibly reverse the curse of flesh on all organic life on Azeroth, and he was very much intending to use it. Unfortunately, everlasting life was too tempting to Curvo, so he just immediately went straight to the king and informed him of the prince's treachery. As a reward, the king revealed the super weapon, explaining to Curvo that the process would be instant instead of the usual longer painful process of mechanization. Hadn't actually used it on his own people yet, but probably nothing to worry about. The device was activated, indeed instantly transforming Curvo into a mechanical being, but his mind was absolutely scrambled. All he could do was repeat the words "found it" over and over again. But anyway, Tinkmaster Overspark of the Alliance and Trade Prince Gazlo of the Horde both simultaneously received word of a mysterious vault door in a junk heap in Tiragard Sound. So they set out to see it for themselves, accompanied by a champion. Soon enough, they found the door and repaired machinery inside the vault, only to witness a recorded message from King Mechagon. A message where the king proudly urged anyone worthy to step forward and be restored to their original Titanforged design. However, the machinery of the vault then proceeded to judge several of the party unworthy, instantly disintegrating them, so everyone cheesed it. but not before grabbing some coordinates to Mechagon itself. Travelling to Mechagon, the party soon encountered Prince Erasmin, who revealed the king's plan. The prince explained that he and his Rustbolt resistance stood against the king, and called for us to join him in this fight. So we did. And after doing a bunch of stuff to fortify the Rustbolt resistance, the prince initiated Operation Mechagon, the Mega Dungeon. A direct assault would be stupid, but Erasmin knew of a way to enter the underground city discreetly. First, champions would need to disable the remote power nodes for Mechagon's HK8 aerial oppression unit, a flying terror which disintegrated any trespassers. These nodes were spread all over the place, so, whilst champions went around doing that, they also faced a host of other terrifying fiends, from a sentient slime to a half-mad self-styled king of scrap. And once the power nodes were disabled, we took the HK8 unit's ass as well. Entering Mechagon itself, we encountered a few more threats with ridiculous names: champions of the Tussle Tonks Arena, the Trash Mistress's mechanical guard dog Cujo, a really annoying stealth bit, and penultimately, the horrors of Head Machinist Sparkflux's Metallic Gardens. And finally, we hitched a transport to Mechagon's tower, confronting the king himself. King Mechagon had already primed his Mech-Originator to remake the world, so the clock was ticking, and he was now piloting a giant death robot. But we took his shiny metal ass. Next, Rise of Ashara. Matthias Shaw received word that several Horde ships had been spotted, sailing out of Zuldazar with the legendary dagger Xal'atath. So the Alliance dispatched a much larger fleet of ships to intercept them, eager to end the war. However, unbeknownst to everyone, they were sailing directly into a trap, thousands of years in the making. See, whilst Horde and Alliance had been slapping each other silly all across the world, Queen Ashara had dispatched her Naga to the Tomb of Sargeras, which no one was paying any attention to anymore, because the Legion had been defeated. So they were able to waltz right in, and steal the Tidestone of Golganeth. With the power of this pillar of creation, Ashara pushed back the sea, revealing her sunken city, Nazjatar. And with no sea beneath them anymore, both Horde and Alliance fleets fell down to the sea floor, with Alliance casualties much higher than the Horde's, because obviously they dispatched a much larger fleet. But not everyone died. Jaina Proudmoore led Alliance survivors, whilst Lorthamar Theron led those of the Horde, carving a path forward until eventually, we were a little bit shocked to discover Lady Priscilla Ashfane leading an army of Naga. Although she'd been imprisoned after her failed coup, she'd been freed from Toldagor by Horde champions, before they'd even freed Talanji, apparently. Jaina and Lorthamar ordered their respective forces to avoid the large army ahead of them, and in doing so, both factions came upon new allies, amphibious races known as the Ankoan and the Gilgoblins. Continuing deeper into the zone, Queen Ashara appeared, taunting the heroes, but we couldn't help but wonder why she was even holding us here. She had the ability to simply drown us at any point, so why wasn't she? Anywho, the book completely skips over the Titanic Essences questline, so, after a bit of scrying, we discovered the Tidestone being protected by one of Ashara's most powerful lieutenants, Lady Zaressa, with both being protected by some sort of barrier or something. At which point, we established a plan. First, we tracked down the Naga's cache of Azerite weaponry and secured it. Whilst doing that, we did run into Ashfane again, but Ashara ended up teleporting her to safety before we could take her ass. Next, we managed to retrieve an ancient weapon, the Javelin of Suramar, a powerful projectile that could pierce any barrier, which is exactly what we needed. Huzzah! After that, Jaina and Gen agreed to a temporary truce with Lorthamar and Thalyssera, working together to infiltrate the tidal conflux where the Tidestone was being held. There, we launched the Javelin of Suramar, shattering Ashara's enchantment around the Tidestone, as well as making the Queen's Lieutenant vulnerable as well. Gen and Lorthamar then dealt with the Naga forces, whilst Jaina, Thalyssera and the champions took Zaressa's ass. And once she was defeated, Jaina and Thalyssera turned their magic towards the Tidestone, blasting open the way to the Eternal Palace. At which point, we did the raid, facing countless untold horrors blah 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 blah. Again, the heroes encountered Lady Priscilla Ashfane, who had now been transformed into a hideous monstrosity. We faced Ashara's own royal court, Zakul, the harbinger of Ny'Alotha and the end of days, and finally, we confronted the Queen at the Circle of Stars. Little did we know that this was no simple hold inside a castle. This was actually a Titan facility, known as Last Prison, with the old god N'Zoth confined here. Just as we were about to strike a killing blow against Ashara, she revealed the full scope of her plans. We were used. She'd wanted the Horde and Alliance to confront her here. In order to unlock the old god's prison, she needed the power of the Heart of Azeroth. We'd unwittingly delivered the item she needed directly into her hands, and she'd already channeled the power inside said item into the Titan's machinery, whilst we'd been avoiding fight mechanics and running around like mad lads. The bonds holding Ny'Alotha in stasis then began to shatter, with the old god breaking free, but being in a somewhat weakened state, Ny'Alotha quickly cheesed it, taking the fallen queen with it, fleeing to its ancient seat of power. Balls. Much of the energy within the heart of Azeroth had been drained during Ashara's ritual. It was going to take time to re-empower the artifact, time we didn't have. It was not going to be long at all before Ny'Alotha's corruption took hold of the already weakened planet, and the Fourth War still dragged on as well. Now for the seeds of rebellion. Speaking of the Fourth War, Anduin watched sadly as yet more wounded and dead were brought back to shore. He just wanted peace, for crying out loud. What is wrong with everyone? Gen tried to reassure the young king. We're doing everything we can. But Anduin disagreed. There was still one other card that he held that he had not yet played. He then descended to the depths of the Stormwind Stockade and confronted Varrock's Saurfang. Initially, the High Overlord would not respond, so the king went ahead and entered the cell, locking himself inside with the much more physically imposing orc. Anduin then wondered aloud, what did Varrock even want from this war? Did he still even believe in the Horde? At which point, Varrock snapped. He'd given everything for the Horde, and now he had to sit and watch as Sylvanas destroyed it. Anduin then informed the orc why he had spared him. He believed Varrock to be honourable, and the orc candidly confessed that he'd been secretly hoping Anduin would kill Sylvanas, something the young king replied he could not do alone before moving to depart. But, as he exited, Anduin left the cell door wide open. It was time for the orc to decide his own fate, and Varrock went ahead and took the chance that Anduin had just offered him. Once free of Stormwind, Varrock made his way to the Swamp of Sorrows, while Sylvanas sent a search party to track him down. Finding the bloke, the Horde champion was faced with a choice: defend Saurfang or remain loyal to the Dark Lady. And canonically, the champion chose Saurfang. The seeds of rebellion had been sown, but rebellions need support if they are to succeed, and who better at rallying the Horde than Thrall? So, Saurfang head to Outland to have a chat with that bloke. Thrall was somewhat on his guard when he saw Varrock approaching, making it clear to his friend that he would not return to lead the Horde, to which Varrock responded, No, I'm not here to make you do that, but I was hoping that you would still fight for it. However, both orcs were then set upon by Forsaken in a sneak attack. After dispatching them pretty easily, Thrall accused Saurfang of leading them directly to him and his family, to which Saurfang explained, No, actually, I followed them here. And it was at this point that Thrall understood. There was no longer any safety here. Perhaps there never had been. Thrall then moved to his forge, shoving it aside and grabbing what lay beneath it. A battle axe, Dragora, Draenor's honour, signifying that he would indeed fight for the Horde once again. Thrall's first act upon returning to Azeroth was to join Saurfang in rescuing Bane Bloodhoof, who was being held in the underhold of Orgrimmar, awaiting death, thanks to snitches. Meanwhile, the Alliance also caught word of Bane's impending execution, with Anduin feeling that the Tauren leader must be rescued immediately, because Bane had always been a more reasonable voice within the Horde. So, Jaina and some champions were dispatched to rescue him, completely unaware that there were also members of the Horde doing exactly the same thing. So they were all very surprised when they bumped into each other. 'Twas particularly unexpected to both Thrall and Jaina, who had not seen each other in years. There was a little bit of unease, but it didn't take long for both sides to see that joining together would greatly increase their odds for success. So they did that. Unfortunately, Sylvanas had anticipated these efforts and stationed her strongest warriors in the Underhold, so the joint task force did face strong resistance. The Blood Elf Magister Hatharel was particularly delighted to face Jaina, having always wanted revenge after the Purge of Dalaran. But sucks to be that guy because we won and freed Bane anyway. Jaina then teleported everyone to safety, to an area overlooking Thunder Bluff, and while Shaw and Saurfang tended to Bane, Jaina and Thrall had a little heart-to-heart chat. The events of recent years had driven a wedge between them, but Thrall thanked his old friend for her help and spoke openly to her about his regrets. Garrosh, the bombing of Theramore, all of the things. And then Thrall got all doom and gloom, saying he feared for the Tauren and their tranquil home. It was very likely that Sylvanas would burn it, just as she had Teldrassil. Jaina then reminded the orc of another world tree, Nordrassil, saved because the armies of many people from both Horde and Alliance joined together. But Thrall was cynical. The Alliance and Horde had worked together so many times, Jaina. and every single time we do that, we go right back to killing each other afterwards. What could possibly be different this time?" To which Jaina replied, "We are." Next, the final push. Before Jaina departed that emotional cinematic, Saurfang gave her a message to take to Anduin, so she did that, and upon receipt of that message, Anduin rode to the Swamp of Sorrows to meet the High Overlord, at which point the two of them had a tense conversation. Sylvanas was growing stronger. This rebellion could only really muster enough soldiers for one more assault. Anduin asked Varrock directly, "What kind of war chief would you be if this rebellion succeeds?" To which the orc monologued. The original Horde was founded on a great lie. A lie that anything they did was honourable. To that end, Sylvanas was a truer heir to Blackhand's bloody legacy than Thrall ever was. But the present Horde deserved better. Anduin then reminded the orc that the Horde did not have exclusive claim to regrets. Arthas, Dalen, all of the things, with Saurfang observing that with so much hate in history, unity might never be possible. So what were they fighting for? And the answer to that question was Azeroth, an answer that transcended individualistic squabbles. Azeroth was everyone's home. Sure, some people had been around longer than others, but literally everyone had done their part to protect the world multiple times over, almost every bloody year. It was only a matter of time before N'Zoth regained its strength. Soon the Horde and Alliance would face a battle for their very survival. They could continue to fight, and die, in this fourth war, or they could just bloody get over themselves and calm down. So, bolstered by Alliance troops, Varrock Saurfang and his rebel army cleared a path to Orgrimmar. But the rebels didn't particularly want to slay the defenders of the capital. The Warchief's allies were still members of the Horde, after all. So, before the gates of Orgrimmar, Varrock challenged Sylvanas to Mak'Gora, knowing full well that the Warchief would emerge the victor, but it was the only way to prevent the needless death of all of the dumbasses. Sylvanas kinda wondered what the hell the orc was playing at, but he'd been a constant thorn in her side while she'd been working diligently for the jailer, so she wasn't going to waste this chance to remove him. Thrall and Anduin offered Varrock their weapons for the fight, but, unfortunately, that didn't save the bloke. The fight was brief and brutal. As the orc fell to his knees, Sylvanas taunted him, stating that he had failed those who believed in him, and that their hope would die with him. Words which really only helped renew the old soldier's figure. He returned to his feet and yelled that the Warchief could never kill hope. She tried at Teldrassil, and failed. Set us all to kill each other at Lordaeron. Failed. Contrary to what Sylvanas believed, the Horde is strong, and it will endure. The High Overlord then did something that only King Varian had managed to do in the past, separating Shalamain into Elamain and Shalator, the two separate swords that made up the legendary weapon. Missing with his first blow, but grazing Sylvanas' face with the second. At which point, Sylvanas had a strop, yelling loudly that the Horde was nothing, clearly forgetting for a moment that she was being watched by every single member of the Horde. But, now that that was out there, she just went ahead and owned it, tripling down by yelling, "You are all nothing." Varrock grinned. Sure, he was probably going to die, but he'd won. Everyone now saw Sylvanas for who she truly was. The old soldier then charged Sylvanas, yelling for Azeroth, but she blasted him with power that the jailer had granted her. Dark energy so powerful that it literally cratered the earth and killed Saurfang instantly. And then she banshee buggered off. Thrall, Anduin and Zakan lifted the fallen orc's body, carrying him through the now open gates of Orgrimmar, with leaders of both factions gathering a short while later to pay their respects. A sort of funeral, before Saurfang's body was to be taken to Nagrand to be buried with his ancestors. Visions of N'Zoth. With that out of the way, leaders of both Horde and Alliance gathered in Stormwind to review their intelligence reports regarding N'Zoth, and they quickly realised that they knew very little. But Magni Bronzebeard then arrived, bringing with him the world's foremost expert on the old gods and their powers, Rathian, the Black Dragon Prince. Anduin was not happy to see that guy. Yes, they had been friends at one point, but Rathian's liberation of Garrosh had caused all of the things. However, Rathian accepted that punch to his face with surprising grace. He deserved it, but he assured the king that he really was here to help. Magni and Rathian then devised a plan within the Chamber of the Heart. N'Zoth had been imprisoned and freed with the power of Titan machinery, so it stands to reason that he could be defeated using Titan machinery as well. Now, it had also been 11 weeks since Mother had begun her analysis of things, so she had some news. Only 3 of the 4 Titan facilities around the planet were operational. The 4th, the the Forge of Origination. You know, the one capable of purging all life from the planet. And guess what? It was being corrupted by the Void. We needed to immediately journey to Uldir to secure and repair the Forge. So we did that. But after dealing with Void corruption and reactivating the Forge, we discovered that it was not operating at full capacity. So, Mother then instructed us to head to another Titan facility in Pandaria, the Engine of Ny'Alotha. Unfortunately, the Mantid, themselves descendants of the old gods, were besieging the Mogoshan vaults, with the entrance now blocked off by a wall of amber. However, after a bunch of faffing about, we discovered Highkeeper Raden, who was still a little bit mopey, disillusioned. He'd gifted the Mogu with life, and they threw that back in his face, and all of his fellow keepers were dead as well. But the negative Nelly did divulge one bit of useful info that gave us a lead. All of the Titan machinery in Pandaria was connected. So, we head to Mogoshan Palace, and indeed discovered a secret entryway into the Mogoshan vaults, which in turn granted us access to the engine itself. We then cleansed that thing of corruption, facing against a manifestation of N'Alotha in the process, and after that, Magni connected the engine to the Chamber of the Heart, with Mother rerouting the power from there to the Forge of Origination. Keeper Raden was actually so impressed and encouraged by these developments, he agreed to accompany us back to the chamber to lend his insight and flirt with Mother. With the Forge powered, we could now potentially use its re-origination protocol to destroy N'Alotha, but only once re-origination anchors had been placed to triangulate the weapon's scope, and to do that, we'd need to enter the heart of Ny'Alotha itself, meeting the old god face to face in its own domain. But stepping inside there would drive us all to absolute madness. Return to Mechagon. Remember how Gelbin Mechatork had been terribly wounded and was currently in a state of suspended animation? I remember. The escape pod containing the High Tinker was taken to Mechagon in the hopes that their technology could maybe solve the problem. And guess what? It did. Not only was Mechatork saved, he was upgraded. And good news, the core of the High Tinker's being remained intact as well. Gelbin was so grateful that he wanted to find a way to repay the Mechanomes for their great kindness. So, he and an Alliance champion delved into Mechagon City one last time to purge the place completely of any dangerous creatures still remaining. And as a result, it was now a peaceful home for the Mechanomes. Now, Prince Erasmian was supposed to succeed his father as ruler to his people, but refused, instead pledging his loyalty to Gelbin Mechatork. And the High Tinker agreed to lead both the gnomes and the Mechanomes, but only on one condition. The prince would serve as a counsellor, and everyone loved that. Ny'Alotha, the waking city. Mother then informed us that there was an anomaly at the Forge of Origination, so both Magni and the champion rushed back there again, only to fall under the influence of N'Alotha, witnessing a vision of the old god's future made manifest. An echo of the Black Empire. Luckily, we were pulled out of that madness by Mother, at which point Rathian informed us of a potential method to protect our mind. We were going to need to do that if we had any hope of stepping into Ny'Alotha and doing the final raid. So we head to Blackrock Mountain, faffed about for a bit, and then ultimately crafted a cloak that could withstand the maddening whispers of the Void. A Shira Kamas, the Shroud of Resolve. We then put this cloak to the test, firstly heading back to the anomaly at the Forge of Origination, and after that, using a newly opened gateway in the Chamber of the Heart that led to horrific visions sent by N'Alotha. Illusions of both the Horde and Alliance capitals that had fallen completely to the Void, depending on which week it was. Unfortunately, opening that gateway in the Chamber of the Heart wasn't the best idea. N'Alotha used it to gain access to and corrupt the chamber. Champions got back just in time to see Void minions all over the place, with Highkeeper Raden sacrificing himself to stay the corruption, being pulled into Ny'Alotha in the process. 'Twas time to confront N'Alotha in its own realm. So, off we went, accompanied by Rathian and with the re-origination anchors in hand. We were immediately beset by illusions, an image of Rathian turning into a betrayer, so we took his ass. Delving ever deeper, we came upon Ashara again. She'd been subjected to constant torment as punishment for her failures. Hadn't lost her arrogance though. She bargained with us for her freedom and her life, promising us a means of killing the old god in return. And she kept her word, handing us the dark blade Xal'atath. The dagger still possessed enough power to shatter N'Alotha's outer shell. We would need to do that first, before the Forge of Origination could truly destroy its target. After that, we fought through hundreds of dread creatures, placing the 3 anchors at the necessary points, before encountering a corrupted form of Raden, Unfortunately, there was nothing we could do to save the Highkeeper, so we took his ass. Mother then warned us that there was only enough power for one single attack from the Forge, which was good to know and certainly didn't add any pressure to the situation, Mother. But, with that out the way, we then went ahead and entered the belly of the beast itself. 'Twas Rathian that took Ny'Alotha, shifting to his dragon form to take flight, before shifting back to his human visage to plunge the dagger into the old god's carapace, greatly weakening the sod. And we then charged. As we struggled in the fight against N'Zoth's corruption and whispers, Magni urged us to remember that we are a child of Azeroth. Her strength is your strength, and stuff. We then allowed Azeroth's power to flow through us, and through the Heart of Azeroth necklace that we've been wearing this entire time. And with the heart becoming the final anchor point, Mother then initiated the Forge of Origination. And boof! One of the most lackluster raid ending cinematics of all time. N'Zoth and all he had created then crumbled. The last of the planet's living old gods was gone, supposedly. For the first time in millennia, Azeroth was free of the dark creatures and their corrupting influence. And that just leaves Armistice. Shortly after that, the leaders of the Alliance gathered in Stormwind to make an announcement. An armistice had been signed with the leaders of the Horde. The Fourth War was now officially over. Most of the citizens in Stormwind celebrated, but not everyone. The terms of the peace agreement were a little bit unsatisfactory to some. There was no demand for the Horde to give up any of the territories they'd taken during the war. Also, the Horde were providing very little information as to where Sylvanas had gone. In fact, they were being a little bit too protective of that fact, in some people's opinions. And by some people, I mean Tyrande Whisperwind. The Night Warrior wanted vengeance. The only peace treaty she'd accept was one written in Sylvanas' blood, and tears from her stupid face. Meanwhile, a meeting was held in Orgrimmar to decide the future of the Horde. All of them were happy with the terms of the peace treaty. There was really only one completely unrelated question on all of their minds. Who the bloody hell leads us now? Lorthamar Theron attempted to nominate Thrall, and the Orc again reiterated that that's not happening. But Thrall is a solutions not more problems kind of guy, so he did offer up an alternative. Just abolish the position of War Chief. Look how many of our leaders have abused the position's power, leading the Horde into dark places for their own selfish ends. Stop giving absolute power to one person. Everyone at the meeting nodded in agreement, and it was then decided that from that day forward, they would govern the Horde. As a group, a council. The future of the faction would be decided communally, and all of the people of the Horde loved that.